The armored truck had been running the same route for 11 weeks. That was the mistake. Marcus Holt knew at the moment he clocked the vehicle turning off Route 9 onto the service road for the third Tuesday in a row, right at 6:47 in the morning, the sun barely cresting the tree line, the road still wrapped in that thin blue mist that made everything look like a dream. He lowered his binoculars, turned to the man crouching beside him in the weeds, and said simply, "Same time. Same road. These people never learn." Dre Jackson grinned, showing the gold cap on his left incisor. Their loss. There were 4 of them. Marcus was the architect, calm, methodical, the kind of man who drew floor plans on napkins and memorized shift schedules the way other men memorized sports scores. Dre was his enforcer, 6'2" of barely contained aggression, loyal to Marcus the way a pit bull is loyal to whoever feeds it. Then there was Coop, real name Leonard Cooper, the driver, a wiry 26-year-old with nervous hands and an almost supernatural ability to navigate any vehicle through any terrain at any speed. And finally Trey, 17 years old, the youngest, the one the others called Little, even though he hadn't been little since he was 14. Trey had been running with Marcus since he was 15. He worshipped him. None of them had jobs. All of them had records. And together, they had been planning this particular job for 2 months. The target was a Viridian security transport truck, one of the private armored vehicles that ferried payroll cash, precious metals, and high-value documents between financial institutions across the state. Viridian wasn't law enforcement. Their guards carried weapons, yes, but they were underpaid, undertrained, and operating on schedules so predictable you could set a watch to them. Marcus had done his homework. He knew there would be 2 guards inside the cab. He knew the truck carried, on this particular Tuesday run, approximately $340,000 in mixed currency and 14 kilograms of refined gold bars being transported to a private auction house. He knew the truck had no GPS panic alert. Viridian's contract had lapsed on that system and they hadn't renewed it. Budget cuts. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that one of the guards had switched shifts. The truck rolled into the ambush point at 6:51, 4 minutes behind schedule, which was close enough. Coop had positioned the stolen panel van sideways across the service road 2 minutes earlier, the hazard lights blinking lazily, a cone set up in front of it. From a distance, it looked like a broken-down vehicle. Inconvenient. Ordinary. Nothing alarming. The Viridian truck slowed. "Here we go," Marcus said quietly into the earpiece. Dre and Trey emerged from the tree line on either side of the road, moving fast, wearing balaclavas and carrying weapons before the driver could process what he was seeing. Marcus came in from behind, cutting off any reverse escape. Inside the cab, the driver, a heavy-set man named Gerald Potts, saw the guns and felt his stomach drop through the floor. "Oh God," he whispered. Beside him, the second guard, a man named Raymond Cruz, reached for his radio. He never got there. Dre's fist connected with the passenger window with the butt of his pistol hard enough to crack the glass. "Hands where I can see them. Both of you. Now." Gerald raised his hands immediately, knocking his coffee cup off the dashboard, brown liquid splashing across the windshield. Cruz hesitated, 1 terrible second of hesitation, and that was all it took for the situation to become something none of them could take back. Trey, positioned at Cruz's door, saw the hand moving toward the radio. He panicked. The shot was loud enough to send birds screaming from the trees for half a mile in every direction. Cruz slumped against the door. Gerald screamed, a raw, horrible sound, and then there was nothing but ringing silence and the tick of the idling engine. "What did you do?" Marcus's voice was a blade. He grabbed Trey by the collar. "What did you do?" Trey's eyes were wide above the balaclava. "He was going for the radio, I swear, Marcus, I swear he was." "Shut up. Shut up." Marcus turned to Dre. "Get the truck open. Now." Gerald Potts was dragged from the cab at gunpoint, hands shaking so badly he could barely comply with instructions. He kept looking at Cruz's body slumped in the passenger seat and making small sounds he wasn't even aware of. "Eyes forward," Marcus told him, not unkindly. "Don't look at him. Just do what I say and you go home tonight." It took them 9 minutes to force the rear compartment, load the currency bags and the gold into duffel bags, and transfer everything to the van. 9 minutes that felt like 9 years. Then Marcus looked at Gerald Potts, kneeling on the dirt road with his hands zip-tied behind his back, and made a decision. He couldn't leave a witness. But he also couldn't bring himself to execute a man who was kneeling in the dirt crying. So he told Dre to do it. And Dre, without hesitation, stepped forward, raised the weapon, and fired. The shot grazed Gerald's left temple. A shallow furrow of torn skin, enough blood to look fatal, enough force to knock him sideways into the dirt where he lay still. Dre took one look, decided it was done, and turned away. "Move," Marcus said, and they ran. Gerald Potts lay in the dirt for 40 minutes. He didn't move because he was afraid to. He could feel the blood running down his face, warm and steady, and he wasn't sure how bad it was, and he was too terrified that they might come back. So he lay there, face pressed against the cold earth, listening to the birds return to the trees, listening to the wind move through the grass, listening to the nothing where his partner's breathing used to be. When he finally moved, he crawled to the truck. His hands were still bound, but Cruz, poor, dead Raymond Cruz, had a pocket knife clipped to his belt, and Gerald, sobbing quietly, managed to get it open and cut himself free. He found the radio. The call went out at 8:22 a.m. Detective Sergeant Lena Marsh arrived at the scene 40 minutes later and stood in the thin morning light looking at Raymond Cruz's body and the tire marks and the scattered coffee and the blood trail in the dirt, and she felt the familiar cold weight settle in her chest that she carried every time. The paramedics had already taken Gerald to County General. She went there next. He was sitting up in the hospital bed with 17 stitches along his left temple and the look of a man who had died and come back and wasn't quite sure how to feel about either. His wife sat beside him, gripping his hand with both of hers. "Mr. Potts," Marsh said, pulling a chair close. "I know you've already been through the basics with the first responders. But I need to hear everything from you. Everything you remember, no matter how small." Gerald looked at her. His voice was steady, which surprised her. There were 4 of them. 2 came from the tree line on either side. 1 came from behind. 1 was already behind the wheel of the van blocking the road. "The one who shot your partner. Can you describe him?" Gerald nodded slowly. "Young. He moved like a kid. You know? Jumpy. He was the shortest one. Wore a dark green jacket under the vest." He paused. He didn't mean to shoot Raymond. I think it surprised even him. Marsh wrote without looking down. "And the one in charge. What can you tell me about him?" "That's what I remember most. Everyone else was breathing hard, but he..." Gerald shook his head. "He was calm like he was at work. The investigation moved slowly at first, and then all at once. Viridian Securities records were subpoenaed, and it was discovered that one of their former employees, a man who had been let go 8 months ago, had knowledge of the Tuesday route, the payload schedules, and the GPS contract lapse. His name was Dominic Reyes. He'd been terminated for insubordination. Dominic Reyes had a brother named Marcus Holt. Half-brothers. Different surnames. But they shared a mother, and more importantly, they'd shared an apartment 2 years ago on the east side of the city." Marsh pulled the thread. Marcus Holt had 3 prior arrests, 2 of which involved armed robbery. His known associates were flagged. Andre Jackson, Dre, appeared twice. Leonard Cooper appeared once. And then there was a juvie-sealed record attached to a Tremaine Holt, Marcus's younger cousin, that Marsh's team managed to crack open with a court order. "For people. For names. We've got them on paper," said Marsh's partner, Detective Roy Sable, spreading the files across the table in the task force room. "Now we need to find them in the world." That took another week. And it was Gerald Potts who helped close the gap. He had remembered, late, when he was home and the shock had faded, a partial plate number on the van. 3 characters. It was enough. The van had been reported stolen 2 weeks before the robbery. But it had been used to commit a traffic violation, captured on a red light camera, 5 days before the robbery, still bearing a different set of plates. That camera image showed the driver's side window down and a partial profile. Coop's face. Clear enough. Coop had a last known address. Surveillance on the address, a warehouse district on the southern edge of the city, began on a Thursday. By Saturday, All 4 men had been photographed entering and leaving a converted storage unit at the end of a dead-end service road. The unit had power running to it. Someone had installed a ventilation unit on the roof. It was their base. "We go at dawn," Marsh told her team. 12 officers. "We seal all exits first. These are armed men who have already killed once. Everyone goes home tonight." Nobody asked questions. Everyone checked their vests. The operation began at 5:17 a.m. on a Sunday. It went wrong within the first 90 seconds. One of the support officers, approaching the south exit of the warehouse lot, kicked a piece of scrap metal in the dark. The sound rang like a bell in the silence. Inside the storage unit, Dre, who slept the way all animals sleep, with one part of his brain always awake, heard it. "Wake up!" He was already moving before the words were out. "Wake up! We've got company!" Marcus was on his feet in seconds. "How many?" "Can't tell." Dre had a weapon in his hand. "They've got the lot covered." Coop scrambled to the window and looked out and turned back with a face the color of ash. "There's cops everywhere, man. We're surrounded." A silence fell over the 4 of them that was heavier than anything they'd carried since the robbery. Trey was sitting on his cot, still half asleep, looking from face to face trying to understand what was happening. Then the loudspeaker crackled. "This is the police. The building is surrounded. Come out with your hands visible. You have 60 seconds to comply." Marcus closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, his expression was unreadable. "We're not going out there," Dre said. It wasn't a question. "We don't have a choice," Marcus said quietly. "The hell we don't." "Dre." Marcus looked at him. "It's over." Dre stared at him for a long moment. Then he moved to the window. The first shot came from inside the unit, shattering the window glass. Officer Dennis Pauley, 34, husband, father of 2, 12-year veteran, was positioned behind a vehicle 20 feet away. The round caught him in the gap between his vest and his collar. He went down hard. Everything happened at once after that. The police returned fire immediately, a controlled, overwhelming volley that shredded the front of the unit. Trey threw himself flat on the ground and covered his head with his arms. Coop crawled toward the back, screaming that they needed to stop. Marcus crouched behind an overturned table, not firing, hands over his ears, something that might have been prayer moving on his lips. Dre stood at the window, firing back. He lasted 22 seconds. When the shooting stopped, the sudden silence was immense. Smoke drifted through the shattered window. Somewhere outside, someone was calling for a medic. "Don't shoot!" Coop's voice, raw and cracking. "We're done. We're done. Put the weapons down and come out on your knees, hands behind your heads." Marsh's voice was controlled, but her hands, braced against the vehicle, were shaking. They came out one at a time. Coop first, then Trey, who was crying openly, his hands trembling so badly he could barely keep them raised. Then Marcus, who walked out slowly, upright, and said nothing as the officers took him to the ground. Dre didn't come out. Marsh stood in the doorway of the unit for a long moment, looking at what was inside. The gold bars were stacked in the corner, still in their transit bags. The money was there. The stolen van's plates were tacked to the wall like trophies. And Dre was on the floor, still, his weapon a few feet away. The fight finally finished. She radioed in. 3 in custody. 1 suspect down. "Officer Pauley, what's his status?" The pause on the other end lasted 3 seconds. It felt like a month. "He didn't make it, Sergeant." Marsh pressed her eyes shut. In the distance, she could hear Trey still crying, out by the vehicles, surrounded by officers. He sounded like what he was. A kid. A terrible, foolish, irredeemable kid. The trial lasted 6 days. Gerald Potts sat in the witness box and looked at Marcus Holt directly, something he'd been waiting months to do, and described everything he remembered with the precision of a man who had lain in a dirt road for 40 minutes deciding he would survive. His voice did not break once. Marcus received life without parole. Coop received 25 years. Trey, because of his age, because of his record, because of 3 different lawyers arguing 3 different angles, received 18 years. He would be 35 when he was eligible for release. He cried at sentencing. Marcus didn't look at him. Marsh sat at her desk the evening the verdicts came in and thought about Gerald Potts's voice on that hospital bed. He moved like a kid. She thought about Dennis Pauly's kids, who were going to grow up without him. She thought about Raymond Cruz, who'd reached for a radio because that's what he was trained to do, and died for it. She thought about how 11 weeks was all it took. 11 weeks of the same road, the same time, the same truck, before someone with binoculars and patience decided to exploit it. She pulled out a new file. A different case. Different names. The same city. She opened it and began to read. Outside, the night settled over everything. The courthouse, the hospital, the storage unit with its shattered window, and the long empty service road where the mist still gathered every Tuesday morning at 6:47, right on schedule, as if nothing had ever happened there at all. If this story kept you locked from start to finish, smash that like button and let me know in the comments. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you're the first to know when the next one drops. New stories, new cases, same energy. I'll see you in the next one.